effort to erase Judeo-Christian biblical values from this country is extraordinary. And it's going to take a long time to reintroduce Americanism and American values to people. Kamala Harris really can be defeated by just asking the American people, what has she ever done? We're dealing with somebody who doesn't even know who they are or what they stand for.
Our founding fathers here in this country brought about the idea that you and I have within ourselves the God-given right and the ability to determine our own destiny. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
There's been a lot of questions surrounding the election, especially the closer and closer we get. That being, what kind of communication keys should the RNC state GOPs be trying to aim for? Then with JD Vance being announced as the new VP nominee on Trump's ticket, we've seen the left and the right try to nix his attempt at being the VP. So here to discuss all of that and more is Newsmax host of America Right Now, communication strategist, and much, much more, good friend Tom Basile.
Good to be with you, Christian. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's good to be here.
We're turning the tables here. I've interviewed you. Now you're getting an opportunity to interview me. So
I think I like it better this way. We'll see how that goes. So you just wrote an op-ed, your weekly op-ed in the Washington Times, talking about JD Vance and how the media has attacked him since he's been announced as the VP. And they've always given him the Charlottesville treatment that you've coined it. Walk us through what that's looked like from being inside of the media and seeing the other side attacking him.
Well, look, what we're seeing right now is what I kind of refer to as shock and awe, right? I predicted that Biden would not be the nominee. I've been predicting it for well over a year. I think that the folks who are kind of behind the scenes in the Democratic Party have been trying to get him out for the last number of months, or get him to say that he was not going to run for re-election. And so they were getting ready, right? They were gearing up to send that memo out to all of their friends in the left-wing press, saying, "Okay, now we're going to have a new ticket, and it's time to get on board, right?" And so all the pundits, all the elected officials, all the anchors, and all those frequent guests that you see on cable news, they all flipped the script. That from Kamala Harris being the most unpopular vice president in history, and someone who's kind of the butt of jokes and memes for the last 4 years, for talking about yellow school buses and Venn diagrams, we're now going to do an extreme makeover on her and turn her into this inspirational and competent historic figure, right? But then now we're also going to have to then go back on the attack after the assassination attempt and a Republican National Convention that you and I were both there. We saw it. It was an incredible moment of unity and strength. Even the left-wing press had to admit it was a very good convention for Donald Trump. And the person that they've decided to really start going after is JD Vance. Why? Because he's the young guy. He's the new guy on the ticket. And he's perhaps one of the most unvetted politicians on a national ticket in quite some time, because he's only been in office a short period of time. And like I said, he's a young guy. He's the youngest vice presidential nominee since Richard Nixon in 1952. And JD Vance is plain spoken. He's an intellectual, all right, so he's smart, but he's not the typical politician. I interviewed him back when he was a candidate, and you could tell that this is somebody who is still kind of getting their sea legs. And what does that mean? That means that he's going to say things, or back in 2021 when he was a candidate, he was going to say some things that some people are going to suggest are impolitic, and then they're going to use that as a way to attack him. And what they did with the cat lady's remark, and everybody calls it the crazy cat lady's remark, and we've all been talking about it for 2 weeks, is they have ignored intentionally what he said in the extended remarks about the importance of marriage and family, namely that this, and it was a sarcastic cat lady's remark, has nothing to do with people who cannot have children, who don't get married, and not for lack of trying, who don't find the right guy or right girl, who have fertility problems, or they have other biological issues that prevent them from having kids. He said that very, very clearly. He took 30 seconds out of his speech to say, let me do the throat clearing here. But of course, nobody heard that, right? Everybody heard, oh, he's insulting women. He's insulting women. And this is Jennifer Aniston has attacked him a couple of weeks ago for this. Of course, just like Trump, who had that line from the Charlottesville press conference in 2017, where he said there were good people on both sides, has been used as a way of supposedly demonstrating that he is a white supremacist. Trump, in that very same press conference, right after that, selectively edited out by the media, predicted that the left would try to cancel George Washington and the rest of our founding fathers, and then said that Nazis and white supremacists should be condemned totally. And he said, I'm not talking about those people because they should be condemned totally. So this is what people in this country are dealing with these days. They are dealing with deliberately and selectively manipulated information to try to drive a narrative on the part of social media companies, the left wing and the left wing press, and the folks on the far left who want to use that misinformation to try to interfere with the election.
And at the root of that, it's just the marketing team. The only reason Kamal is still standing in this race because of her marketing team. And I would argue that Democrats, throughout history, have been better marketers. They've been better political strategists. And they see the long term. They see the big picture, if you will. So how can the Republicans be spending JD Vance's actual attributes and just ignoring all these fake news, if you will, about what they're making up about him? Because we should be learning from the Democrats about this.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the Democrats are a whole lot better at this politics thing than conservatives and Republicans. I say that all the time. I've been saying that for years. When it comes to JD Vance, a couple of things. Going back to the cat lady thing, he's right. He is right about the importance of marriage and family. And I want you to, when we talk about the two different worldviews that are right now clashing in American culture, and it's something that you and your generation are experiencing because you're growing up in the midst of all of this, is there was a Pew study that was done back in April, and it was a very simple question. Do you think that the country would be better off if people prioritized marriage and family? About 60% of Trump voters said yes, which I thought was still a low number, by the way. Only 19% of Biden voters said yes. Now, of course, all of the data will tell you from an economic perspective, from a health perspective, from a mental health perspective, from a societal sort of development and resiliency and strength perspective, marriage and family is the cornerstone of that. If you de-emphasize marriage and family, you get a lot more chaos, right? So JD Vance is correct about that, and I think that maybe if it's not him, that there need to be voices within the Republican Party, within the conservative movement, to say, yeah, you know what, it's fine to think that people who get married and have children, ultimately those kids have better educational outcomes. You have better economic outcomes. You have a better and more supportive aging. As you get older, you have lower incarceration rates, lower instances of challenges with mental health, lower instances of drug abuse. A lot of that stuff, a lot of those challenges that we're seeing in society are connected to the fact that we have now, that the left in this country and the Marxists in this country have de-emphasized marriage and family. So I think that that's an important thing to talk about. with respect to JD Vance's strength is the fact that he has the ability to connect with people who believe that they have been left behind by the system. And remember, if you remember the speech, and you were there on the floor of the convention for the speech, he didn't just rail against Republicans and Democrats, or rail against Democrats. He railed against Washington because he grew up in Appalachia. He grew up in a place where it didn't matter who was in power. It was going to suck, right? You were going to have, you had, they're throwing welfare at these folks, but it didn't really work. It didn't create opportunity. It didn't create empowerment. And anybody who's ever come to you and said, like Ronald Reagan said, the nine most terrifying words in the English language, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, right? It didn't work. And so what happens with these people? They recoil from the entire system. They are now on the fringes of the system or outside the system to one degree or another. And what I think he can do is say, look, we want to speak to you as those individuals who are on the fringes of the system. Whether you are in an urban environment and you've got kids that are locked in a failing school because Randy Weingarten and the Teachers Union and Democratic Party will not support school choice, or you're in rural America where you've got terrible, meth and drug and fentanyl addiction and a lack of opportunity, and welfare has totally failed, rural white communities as well. I want to talk to those people, the people that Republicans, frankly, oftentimes don't, talk about. And I think that that's something that he needs to be doing. How do you engage these low propensity voters, people who just they don't care who's in power, they don't believe in the system anymore? How do you get them to believe in the system and want to vote for him and for Donald Trump? I think that's the best way to use JD Vance.
Yeah, I think that really tears down the system in a way, because if you take the mindset, it's not red versus blue, it's them versus you. If you take that mindset, then you don't have 50-50 Republicans, Democrats. You have 70-30. You even have maybe 80-20. If you can understand that, this common sense mindset, and understand what each American is facing every day, that's going to win it, and that's going to beat identity politics, which is all the Democrats use, especially under Kamal today. I mean, she's really a chameleon. The Trump's team has taken this stance recently, even like 3 or 4 weeks ago when this news first broke. That's what my nickname for Kamala became, was Kamala the Chameleon. Because if she's in a room with black people, she's going to be black. If she's in a room of Indians, she's going to be Indian. If she's in a room of rich people, she's going to be rich. If she's in a room of poor people, she's going to be poor. She just tries to fit the mindset of the room.
Yeah.
Instead of fitting the mindset of the American people. Just her biggest flaw. So
well,
what do you
But let me say something about that, Christian. The bigger problem is not that she's sort of conforming herself to, she needs to conform herself to the will of the American people necessarily. She doesn't even know who she is. And that's kind of the bigger problem, right? She's a phony. She's a phony because she doesn't have any kind of center. A lot of people in this country will give somebody a lot of credit, even if they disagree with them, for at least having convictions. She doesn't have any convictions. What are her convictions? We don't know. Is she Christian? Is she Hindu? We don't know. Is she African American? Is she Indian? Is she a moderate who's tough on crime? Is she the leftist that she was when she was in the United States Senate? Is she the border czar? Or is she somebody who now is going to try to tell people that she's going to get tough on the border? Is she a radical Green New Dealer? Or is she something that they're going to try to repackage her into? And that's where you have the real crisis. Because when you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know who they are or allows themselves to be so blatantly manipulated by the elites who are backing her, then you're really not electing a leader. You're not electing a president. You're electing an automaton. And that's the big danger in all of this, is we're dealing with somebody who doesn't even know who they are or what they stand for. When I worked for George W. Bush, I'd have people come up to me during campaigns, or talk to me when I served in the administration all the time. And they would say, you know what, I don't agree with him on a lot of things. But I think he genuinely believes in the positions that he takes and that he believes that he's doing the right thing. George W. Bush, you can say whatever you want to say about him. He knows who he is, okay? And he's not somebody who tilts at windmills. Donald Trump, you don't have to like Donald Trump. You don't have to love Donald Trump. But if you look at Donald Trump's positions on issues, really with the exception of abortion, that's the outlier. And people do moderate their views or change their views on abortion, or get more conservative rather on abortion as they get older, and you become a father or you become a grandfather. I think those are moments when you start really rethinking how you view life. But if you look at his interviews, going back to the early 1980s when he really kind of came onto the scene in American business, the business community, and American culture, he's remarkably consistent. Joe Biden has taken every position on every issue imaginable over a career that dated a half a century. He's literally taken every position on every issue, even positions that he said that he would never take. He has then gone and taken those positions because it was politically expedient for him. Donald Trump has been remarkably consistent. And I think that, focusing on his leadership ability is something that is, and that consistency is something that they don't do terribly well, in comparison to a Kamala Harris, who really can be defeated by just asking the American people, what has she ever done? What has she ever accomplished? In her time in the Senate, in her time as vice president, what has she ever accomplished that was a positive, other than running around talking about abortion and how abortion needs to be, restored and needs to be expanded as much as possible.
And I think that's a great point you're making there, especially to win the youth, in my eyes. I think the biggest thing young people are looking for today, and I go and talk to them, whether they're a Democrat or they're hardcore Republican, whatever they might be, that they're looking for authenticity in the political system. That's what we've been missing our whole lives, is that we've been raised in a polarized political culture. Everything's now political. Look at Hollywood. Even go buy a drink at Starbucks. It's political. I mean, they're supporting Planned Parenthood. It doesn't matter. This hasn't been like that when my parents were growing up. I'm sure it wasn't like that when you were growing up 40 years ago, whatever it was. It doesn't matter. But we're looking for the authenticity in politics. And Kamala's, like you're saying, has just taken whatever is politically expedient her whole life. Joe Biden's done the same. But you don't have to focus.
And Christian, let me just pick up on that, okay? Consider this. This is a woman who just in the last couple of weeks has changed her accent depending on, and the Democrats love to do this. They do this. They are masters at doing this. Hillary Clinton tried to do it, and it was terrible. But if she is in front of a black audience, she tries to sound black. If she's in front of a business audience, she tries to sound educated and more, speak in a different dialect or a different tone of voice. It's so incredibly phony that you'll even change the way that you speak to an audience. But how insulting to every single person that has to listen to that. Be like, that's not the way that she talks on television. Why is she coming here? Because she's in a black church, she thinks she has to talk to us differently? I mean, it's the level of manipulation and is unlike anything that we have really ever seen before. And the difference between when your parents and I were growing up is that what we've seen in these institutions is the embedding and the expansion of Marxist ideology. Marxism, domestically, is the biggest threat that this country faces. And it's Marxism, and you want to call it socialism, you can call it socialism. But understand, and it's important for college students, it's important for people who are uncomfortable with this notion to fully appreciate that the goal of the Marxist or the goal of the socialist is literally to take everything that you think you know about God and religion, science and biology, your country, the law, the other institutions that are important, and take it and turn the whole damn thing upside down. Because when people, instead of being secure in their knowledge and in truth, or secure in their appreciation for this Constitution that we have and the American principles that have made us strong, when you take all of these things, marriage, for instance, and biology, if you take that and you turn that upside down and you make people confused, you also make them far more pliable. And that is exactly what's happening at most of the institutions of higher education in this country. It's what's happening in public schools in this country. It's what's happening in the media. It's happening on TikTok with the influence of communist China, and it's happening in the left-wing media, among other places.
I think that right there is what could really separate the right and the left's statements of their messaging today. Because even if you look at them, they're both almost saying the same thing. Let's save our democracy. Let's save the republic.
We don't live in a democracy, though, Christian, and that's important for you to always point out. We live in a constitutional republic.
That's right. I fully agree. But I'm saying the left is saying save the democracy. The right saying save the constitutional republic. We don't see why they're saying what they're saying.
Right.
They're both saying the same things, even with the same words sometimes, but they mean completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I don't see the right doing all the time is showing the why behind their saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they could be pointing out the Marxism behind Kamala's policies, but they're not. They're not showing that why. And the why is what's going to win us over the voters who actually want to preserve America for their kids, who don't want to fall into the demise of Ronald Reagan's famous quote where he talks about one generation away, but he ends that quote by saying, I don't want to be on the front porch with my grandkids telling them what it was once like when America was free. And nobody wants to be doing that. So why aren't we pointing out and exposing the big picture of the left's game? I don't think we're doing that. And we're just saying that they want to destroy our country.
I agree.
But
I
why?
agree. I agree. I agree with that 100%. I think that we need to create these simple linkages for people, and in part, I think it's some of our messengers, right? Donald Trump is good at certain things, but he's not professorial. He's not somebody who is going to. I think he's not very detail oriented when he speaks. But I do think that there is definitely a place in our media and in our politics to start linking the socialist and Marxist ideology to what we're seeing. It's happening more today than it was back when Trump first ran for re-election in 2016. I think that the pandemic has also I think, lit a fire under people to make them understand that the massive social experiment that was COVID-19 and the unaccountable bureaucracy that destroyed millions and millions of lives and shredded the Constitution, I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of folks. I think that the big challenge right now, and we're recording this in early August, before the election, the big thing that people need to do now is not take a look at some national polls that show, Trump, Harris ahead, or Trump barely ahead, or it's pretty even. and then get discouraged and say, well, you know what, the deck is stacked against us. It's a phony election. It's going to be rigged. And we can just, who cares? We'll just disengage. You cannot disengage. And that's really critical. I've had a number of people call me who have not been happy with the way that the Trump campaign has messaged or handled this pivot to Kamala Harris and said, wow, I mean, she's getting this honeymoon. They flipped the script now, and they went from bashing Biden to get him out immediately to Harris is the best thing since sliced bread. And that's just going to be so much to try to overcome. And I think that that's defeatist. People cannot do that. There are independents in this country still think that she's incompetent. And if the campaign over these next number of weeks continues at every measure just to use her own words against her and her own record against her, I think that Trump has the ability to win this election. But it's going to take people really fighting for it and really engaging, and I mean in a political sense fighting for it, not anything other than that. But not getting discouraged by the fact that the Republicans are yet again kind of the underdog in this race. And people need to continue to engage right through November.
And the polls speak for that. If we look at like early June, July, and Kamala's percentages of winning the election or being in the race were 2, 3, 4, 5. They continue to climb. As soon as she was announced, I think it was 9% that she would win the election. Then over the next week, that 9% jumped up to 41%. Now we're seeing that's coming more even between her and Trump. I think one of the big ways she's doing that is her coalitions that she's made. I mean, she has all these groups coming to support her. She's formed the Black Coalition. She's formed, a youth coalition, all these groups behind her. Trump's done a lot of the same. And I think the biggest thing that's going to help him win is the grassroots, going to where the people are today, especially to win the youth. Because now seems like she's ahead in the youth based off what she's doing. And now Kamala is brat, whatever that means, of Charlie XCX. National Report asked me that the other day. Don't really remember what I said to them at this rate. But it does make sense.
I remember she called your generation stupid.
She did.
Remember that. She said you guys are not that smart. And look, I think that we've seen young people starting to go more for Trump if they really take a step back from the propaganda that their professors feed them, and they realize that Kamala Harris, and it doesn't matter who's at the top of the Democratic ticket. I mean, this is Obama and Holder and David Plouffe and Susan Rice and all of these folks. It's all the same people. She and even Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I mean, these are the people who are really running the show. It's not her. I mean, for God's sake, the president of the United States wandered onto an airplane the other night, and nobody knew what the heck he was doing. So I think young people are realizing that these are statists. These are people who care about growing the state, not putting more money in your pocket, not ensuring that you're going to be able to have the job that you want, not being able to they don't care whether or not you're going to be able to afford a home, unless you're doing it through some sort of government program by which they own you. And they don't care about your agency. They don't care about your your empowerment. Because that's not what leftists do. That's not their priority. Their priority is dominion and control. It is not the power of, the individual. It's the power of the collective. And it's just fundamentally anti-American. I hope that more young people will start to pick up on that. And look, Donald Trump may not be like the perfect messenger in the world. Okay. Look, 70% of Americans said they didn't want Donald Trump and they didn't want Joe Biden because they felt they were too old or they just wanted new people. It's hard to argue with the majority of Americans. You do have to kind of listen. But he has a record that he's going to run on, and I do think that he can. Young people are looking for somebody who's going to stand up for them, and the more that the right can talk about how Kamala Harris wants to grow government, doesn't want to grow your wallet or your bank account, well, I think that's a pretty, I think that's going to be that's going to ensure that Trump gets a larger percentage of the youth vote than he did certainly in 2020.
He's got 20 points to gain right now. Joe Biden's 2020 numbers and where he is now and where he should be to win it and have a good chance at the election. I think the biggest two things he can be doing, should be doing, to incorporate our thoughts here and what they're doing now is, one, form a youth coalition, and then two, take that youth coalition and travel the country on a college tour. Take some of their more Gen Z surrogates, say Vivek Ramaswamy or Charlie Kirk, and take this message that we're talking about now, and almost Charlie Kirk's message from at the convention. I think it's the best speech I've ever heard him give. I think it's the message my generation is looking for, that we have a choice between prosperity and demise. We have a choice between having kids, having grandkids. We have to tell them what our country is like when it is free, not when it was free. We have that choice. This choice is in this election, whether we go down the road of Marxism and they refute the lies they've been taught in colleges, or just live off of surface level political talking points. We have that choice now. We've got to be going to talk to every single individual college student across this country, face to face, not just over TikTok. This has got to be happening.
And I look, and with all due respect to Charlie, I don't think that the prescription is taking people that even have, a high profile like him. I don't think conservative lightning rods are the answer. I think regular people, real students, real people, giving them the ability to go around the country and talk, not somebody who's made a bunch of money off the conservative movement and is sort of part of the apparatus, but somebody who's just a normal kid, a normal, college student who can articulate and can reason with people about this using facts, history, and science. That's always the best prescription to engage with the left on. And if you get a handful of people who say, well, you know what, maybe I was lied to, or maybe their arguments don't hold together, then it's a victory. This is not going to be the damage that's been done to the country and to, Gen Z and millennials before that, from these, from the institutions of learning in this country, and now through social media, is going to take a solid generation to repair. It is not something where we're looking between here and November. There needs to be a much broader strategy, because the indoctrination and the misinformation and the manipulation has been, greater than anything any psychological operation from any military has ever done. When you look at the combination of American education and social media alone, to say nothing about, television and newspapers and Hollywood, right? Just those two entities alone, the damage that has been done has been absolutely extraordinary. And it's going to take a long time to claw our way back and reintroduce Americanism and American values to people, not republicanism or conservatism, Americanism, again, to people in this country, particularly younger folks.
I fully agree with you, especially in the aspect of everyday people, everyday young people traveling the nation, just so we have a backbone on the Trump campaign, so we have that name behind us. And even if it's a Charlie Kirk spearheading it per se, whether he has to be at every single one or not, we just have to have some kind of backbone behind us so we're not just standing on our own and set there to fail. That's my only point in calling them out. And I think in 2016, Trump had a whole youth coordinator, David Blair, with Leadership Institute, where he's at now. They had that. 2020, I'm not sure what they had. In 2024, I don't see a plan. I think that needs to happen. And even what he's doing with the Black Coalition, he was just in Atlanta yesterday, day before, had that round table with Black leaders in Atlanta. If you looked at the picture, none of them are celebrities. None of them are important people that we'd all recognize as soon as we see them. or the everyday leaders of Atlanta. I didn't recognize any of them, but that's what we need with the youth on college campuses.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And look, I think Young Americans for Freedom, YAF, I think is doing a phenomenal job. There are some organizations, and sometimes, Christian, it actually benefits that it's not. It benefits the people who are going out to not be affiliated with the campaign, to not be, well, I'm showing up just wearing a MAGA hat, because what we're talking about here is bigger than one candidate. It's bigger than one man. It's bigger than one campaign, right? We're talking about sort of reintroducing America to a whole generation of people who've been told that America is a cauldron of oppression and injustice and victimhood, right? That this country isn't worth saving, that it just burned the whole damn thing down. We need something totally different. These are all people who've been told God is dead, not important, faith isn't important, so it is much bigger than just the campaign. And I think that from the outset, it should be treated as such. And if you get that American message and you understand what has made this country great, well, then naturally you're going to be more comfortable saying, you know what, we can't have 4 more years. We can't have a 4th term of Barack Obama or a 2nd term of Joe Biden in the form of Kamala Harris.
I think that's the bigger mindset we need to have. And I agree with you. Got one final question for you, Tom. I'd like to end every episode with asking this question. If you could give America or my generation, you could tell them one thing not to give up, what would it be?
In terms of a freedom not to give up?
It could be a freedom, could be an idea, your message to young people.
Oh, man. Oh, that's only one thing, Christian.
Only one.
I think this is gonna, and maybe this isn't the maybe this is not going to be everybody's choice, but the effort to erase Judeo-Christian biblical values from this country is extraordinary. It's been going on for a while. It started probably with, Gen X, but it has really picked up steam in the era, in the digital era, and the era of social media. And part of that is erasing religious liberty. And religious liberty is the first freedom of the country. If you cannot worship your God as you see fit without interference from the government, then you don't have freedom of speech. And you don't have all of these other freedoms. Remember, the Constitution of this country was written for a moral, according to John Adams, was written for a moral and religious people. The left took this whole idea of separation of church and state, which doesn't even exist in the Constitution. It was part of a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote, one line in a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to somebody in 1802. It's not in the Constitution. And the left wants people to believe that there's freedom, there should be freedom from religion, not freedom of religion. But those values and the freedom to worship are incredibly central to the vision of equality, not equity, equality, and the freedom and the concept of justice upon which this country was founded. So even if you are not a person of faith, understand the critical nature of that faith, of the underpinnings of Western civilization and people's right to worship in this country, and how that impacts everything else that we do. So I think that's my answer.
Those values are the foundation of Americanism, to the foundation of our future. if we get there. So, Tom, thanks for joining us today. Tell people where they can find you on social media, when your show is on Newsmax, all of the above.
Sure. All right. So you can find me at Tom Basile. Sorry, at tombasile.com. All right. And so that's my website. And then on X, it's at Tom_Basile. It's Basile. And I am on America Right Now. I'm the anchor there from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Newsmax Television. You can read my columns in the Washington Times, online every Friday, in the paper every Monday.
Tom, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Christian. Thank you for having me.